well, actually, for the establishment of the Center for Faith and Giving, and Bishop Melvin was on the committee that called me. So I feel a special kinship with Bishop Melvin, and her being among those who sought to call me to this position. So that's a special thing for me.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I think we are ready to hand it over to you, and we're so looking forward to your session. And thank you so much for being with us. So we're going to hand it right over to you.
Well, thanks. And again, I'm very pleased to be with you all tonight. Tonight, we're going to be looking at best financial practices. These are things that we think should be existing in most every congregation. They're sort of the best way to do things when it comes particularly to the handling of money. But we also think about the building of our budgets and the way in which we understand what our work is about. There are fiduciary responsibilities that we have as congregations and boards, and there are ethical considerations that go along with that. We're not going to touch deeply on the ethical considerations tonight. That's another workshop, but we are going to look at the things that we think are necessary to help you in your ministry and being accountable for and for the good management of the resources people entrust to you to do mission and ministry. So we're going to start with some simple poll questions tonight, and we'll see where everybody's at on some of this material. So I'm going to call on Jamie to do that for us, if she would.
Okay, I have these poll questions ready. I do ask again, I know some of you are just coming in, to please mute yourselves so that we can hear Bruce as he's presenting. So I'm going to launch these poll questions now. And you should see them on your screen. Okay, so does everyone see the poll questions?
So go ahead and answer those as quickly as you can. We're not going to spend a lot of time here. Just go ahead and it's a simple yes or no. And I don't know if my screen sharing is interfering with that or not. Jamie, I'm trying to answer the questions and I can't seem to.
Okay, let's stop sharing the screen for just a minute and see. Oh, okay. No, I'm actually starting to get some answers coming in, so you may not have needed to do that. Yeah, so just again, if you all could go ahead and answer those yes or no as you're going through. Thank you so much. I'm starting to see the answers come through. I don't know if they're, you know, technology is a wonderful thing when it works exactly how we want it to, but sometimes that is not the case. So are you able to see those answers as well there? Great.
I am. So just quickly move through them. There are quite a few of you on board with us. This is not a test in the sense we're not going to give you a grade for this or not. We just want to get a feel for what's out there.
Yes, and these are anonymous questions. You do not have to be concerned.
I won't know who's answered what.
We won't know.
This is actually kind of to dashboard our effectiveness tonight. If there were areas that we could have covered better, and if there are areas we need to be aware of. So take the time to run through those. There's just 10 quick questions. The last one, to those of you who are getting to it's just for fun. But honest answers are welcome. We have 27 participants and I've got showing about 14 answers. So, and if you decide you don't want to take the poll, nobody's going to make you do that. But it would be helpful to me in my learning if you take a minute to do that, and then I'll understand how well we did tonight.
Okay, just well, still have folks coming in, but anytime you want me to close out this poll so you can, I think it'll give us the results.
Sure, we're gonna give it 15 more seconds.
Okay.
All right, go ahead and stop the poll.
Okay. Okay, should be able to see your results there now.
There we go. So we've got our church's written policies. 11 out of 17 said yes. Church has financial board records securely stored off-site. Looks like about half, just under half. Good practice to have only one person handle, record, disperse money. We're going to talk about that tonight and why that may not be in our best interest long-term. Goal should be to have a balanced budget every year. We're not going to unpack that a lot tonight, but that's not our only goal in building a budget, and that we will talk about tonight. Pastor does not need to submit receipts or mileage logs because he or she is very trustworthy and accountable to God. Actually, we think it's a good idea if they do that. And we'll explain why. Donor restrictions are suggestions. Well, not really. Actually, they are very important and we need to follow that. Donor intent and our honoring it is important to keeping our 501c3 status, and we'll chat about that. Audits are important, and I'm glad you all agree. Conflict of interest reporting. Actually, regardless of the size of your church, it's always a good thing to have your officers who are making financial decisions make a disclosure if they have any gain or benefit from those. And that's just so that it's open and transparent. The board does have fiduciary responsibility for the church, ultimately, even if it's the trustees or some other piece that has legal responsibilities. In almost every case, the board is receiving financial reports or treasurer's reports and needs to be accountable for that. And for the two of you who would rather be someplace else, I'm glad you chose to be here anyway. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about this tonight and why this conversation is so important to us. And the simple reason is that statistically, 30% of all churches globally are going to suffer from some kind of fraud or theft. It is assumed based on the statistics, insurance reporting, and then kind of extrapolating from what we don't get reported. It's assumed that globally, about a third of our churches are going to experience some kind of fraud or theft. It's estimated that an even larger percentage perhaps goes unreported. It represents, this is the staggering number, about $68 billion globally in 2020, compared to total global missions in 2019, which was $60 billion. It's projected that in 2025, it could be as high as $80 billion. So it's important. When we talk about money in the church, we're talking about a bunch of different things, but two things in particular. Biblically, the idea of money has spiritual implications to it. The Bible talks about our relationship with money, how we feel about money, how we allow it to define us, how we utilize the resources we have, and the way in which we can employ the resources that we have to advance the values of the reign of God. Essentially, these are the two conversations that are happening parallel in the biblical witness of about 2,500 verses that relate to money, wealth, management, ownership, etc. Why is this important? Well, money is the fuel that makes mission possible, right? If we're going to send that rocket ship to the moon, it's got to have plenty of fuel in it. If we're going to engage in meaningful mission and ministry in our communities, we know that takes resources, of which money is one of the key, but not only factors. We know that it provides for staff and facilities and resources to impact the issues of human needs. So the money conversation is an important conversation in our churches. Kind of looking at 30,000 feet, most of our discussions around money in the church deal with the budget. So it's important to think about the fact that the budget is a planning tool for ministry. And so when we approach the building of the budget, when we talk about the budget, we need to remember that that's what it is. It is not some item that we worship next to the Trinity, but it is rather a planning tool that we engage in building so we can execute the vision that God has given us. It represents the resources we anticipate we'll have to do that work. And it maps out for us over the course of usually a year how we're going to invest those resources to do what God has called us to do. And most important, it is based on our vision or mission statement. What is it that we're about? What is it that God has called us to do? That's a red thread that you can envision it two ways, either running from left to right through everything we do, that it touches every decision we make, or you could use it as a plumb line. You could make it vertically to measure our effectiveness in what it is we've been called to do. The vision is what's most important. The budget is one of several tools we have to help us get it done. It's also important to remember that a budget is a theological document. And so pastors, that's why it's important that your voice is present in financial discussions and deliberations. This is a spiritual matter. It represents our values. It displays the available alternatives for mission and ministry, which we'd expect the pastor to have something to say about. Not the only say by any means, but their voice for clarity and purpose is important. It can reinforce our past priorities as we build a budget and we take legacy items forward with us that we've had before that say these things still are a part of who we are. It can revise those priorities by making less or more money available to do them. It can establish new priorities by creating new lines and new momentum for resources if our sense of vision and purpose, or the time in which we're doing it and the culture in which we're doing it, appear to have changed and need to be adjusted to. And honestly, it can eliminate old priorities. I'm sure that most of you who do line item budgets have some legacy lines in there that they've been in there since 1955. We don't really put any money into them, or we put a placeholder amount, but we don't really spend anything for them. But, you know, somebody went to the trouble of making that spreadsheet for us, and we just haven't had the heart to erase that line. And the fact of the matter is that every year when we're building the budget, this is an opportunity to clarify who we are and what we're about, and for it to be up to date for our current circumstance. I want to talk about the framing of the budget conversation, which I think is really important, because so often we'll enter the time of an annual campaign or the asking for resources for our mission as talking about the budget, and we need to raise the budget. We need more money for the budget. We're not funding a budget, we're funding mission and ministry. And I think language is extremely important to us and should be remembered. The question we're asking is not what does it cost in the sense of dollars and cents, but what's the total investment required for us to answer our calling? So we're thinking of all of the elements that go into that, not just the financial elements, though there certainly will be a dollar and cents call, but we're thinking of it as an investment rather than a cost center. We're thinking about the mission we've been called to do externally. We're thinking about the programs we're called to build up our people and strengthen our own spiritual journeys so we can engage in those external missions and have them be meaningful and powerful and live a life of good witness for the gospel of Jesus Christ. Of course, we're thinking about compensating our staff and the benefits it takes to do that. We're thinking about our building and grounds and the assets we own, and what does it take to maintain those in a way that preserves them and helps us utilize them to their fullest capacity. And of course, within the building of our budget, we'll also have some of those things that don't quite fit anywhere else, and we toss them in that ubiquitous bucket called administrative costs. But most things we can draw to areas of ministry that we feel called to support. And that depends on the type of budget we're using as to how we talk about this. Most every church should have a line item budget. And that's simple things like pastor's salary, pastor's housing, pastor's pension, pastor's health insurance. We'll start with personnel. We could go over to, the electricity, gas, the phone and communications, the insurance. We could talk about our commitment to Disciple Mission Fund and what percentage of our budget we're giving to that. And we look at those and we look at them monthly over the course of the year, and we know what we've committed to, and we know where we are in meeting those commitments. That's a line item budget. It's very necessary for the board and particularly for the treasurer to have a line item budget to know how to move those resources and account for them and report on them. And most of us are familiar with those. Zero-based budgeting is kind of a line item budget on steroids when we're in a visioning process, where we go ahead and put in those fixed expenses we have. We have contracts. We may have a mortgage payment, an insurance payment. We may have a contract with staff agreeing to pay them a certain amount and provide certain benefits. We build those in, and then the rest is zeros. And the way we fill those out from zeros to dollars is we ask ourselves, how does what we're going to do help us live out our mission and ministry? So if you're in the education department of the church, what resources do you need? You're starting at zero, most likely. What does it take to do our part to help the church fulfill its mission and vision? And every department starts with zero and looks that way. Now, you can't do this every year. It's time consuming. And it's hard work, but you can do it about every 3 to 5 years. If you haven't done it in a while, I'd move that to a shorter number, to really be sure that your budget again reflects the moment you're in and the resources you need to execute the program God's called you to do. A cash flow budget's yet another type of budget. This one is designed primarily to help us map out when we expect resources to be available. So we'll take a 3 to 5 year history of income, and we can map that out that in April, we usually have received X percentage of the budget, et cetera, and total cash dollars averaging thus, and you move it all the way across the year. And so where you are in anticipation of resources needed and where those will come in during the year. That's important for preparing for things like your big insurance payment, which might be due in August. And August is kind of a really tough time for resource gathering in some of our congregations. So we're thinking in March, when we have better cash flow, we need to be putting aside some money for that insurance bill so that when it comes due, we'll have it, because we know traditionally we will not have the resources coming in at the rate we do over certain portions of the year. And the last thing is the narrative budget, and we're not going to do a presentation on that tonight, though I would love to, because it is my favorite kind of budget. It's the most useful budget for the members of our congregation. It's useful for the board too, because it paints a picture of the impact of our mission and ministry. But for most of our members, a line item budget is not what they're interested in. They really don't want to know how much you're paying per roll of toilet paper. What they want to know is there toilet paper when I need it? And what impact does my giving have? How does my giving change lives? How is ministry and mission happening? by the resources I help provide for the church to do what God's called the church to do. The narrative allows you to tell your faithful story with images and pictures and quotes from people that take a look at your vision and move the dollars from that into the various ways in which you execute that. So we're not talking about personnel and administrative costs now. We're talking more in terms of mission and worship and spiritual growth for the congregation, and moving actual pieces of salary into those areas from that, what would be a personnel line item in the budget. If the pastor spends 20% of his or her week preparing for worship, then that really is worship related expense. It is not personnel. People appreciate seeing that way and beginning to understand that our staff are part of the resources we have to do the mission God's called us to do. And this is how we delegate their time. You'll find more on narrative budgets, excuse me, on our website. I have a little Kentucky cough medicine here, some honey and lemon and a little extra brown liquid to try to get that tickle out of my throat. When you're building your budget, the old way to do it for many of our churches is that at the finance board meeting at the beginning or end of the year, whenever the budget is presented for the coming year, the trustees appear from the closet of the room in which you're holding the meeting with smoke and mist and incense, and they say, "Behold the budget." And no questions can be asked. They've made the decisions by themselves about what we're cutting or what we're increasing and what we're paying and what we're not paying. And you all just kind of got to go along with it. There's a better way. And that better way is a collaborative mission-focused process, whereby all the stakeholders in the budget building process are a part of its creation. So that means your worship team, your education team, your mission team, all of those folks have a seat at the table in the creation of the budget based on the best available information we have in terms of what we can anticipate and what resources we're going to need to invest, and we build the budget together. This is a much more effective way of producing ownership within the church of the way in which the resources are going to flow. And again, everyone's looking at that red thread of vision, mission, and ministry. What are we called to do in the process of building it? Now, budgets need to be managed. This is the fiduciary side that usually falls to the board and or the finance committee, who may report to the board. What we're doing there is we're accounting for variances in income and expenses, and we're watching, are we on track on both sides of the ledger? Are we a little ahead or a little behind? And how do we account for that? For example, I remember one year there was great panic toward the end of the summer when we discovered we were $1,200 over a $5,000 education line item. And it had to do, when we went back and tried to figure out what happened, was it was VBS. And what had happened was that we'd had an extra 50 kids in VBS we hadn't budgeted for. What a great problem. Yes, we overspent. Yes, we had curriculum we were going to have to buy for the fall. Yes, we needed to account for the variance and then make adjustments to the budget so we could purchase that curriculum. But what a great problem to have, that it had been because we'd been so successful. We had overspent, but we were able to then make up for it from other areas in the budget so we could carry forward the program. And it was really something to celebrate, not something to be in angst over. Another thing that's important is that we should have policies in place that talk about who builds the budget, how those people are chosen, how that final budget is adopted. In some congregations, that's a congregational meeting. I'm not sure that that's always most effective, particularly in larger congregations, because they've not been involved in building the budget. They don't know some of the subtle pieces that are in the budget, and they may want to kill the budget over $400 in a $400,000 budget that they want moved someplace else. Every church is different and you need to look at what your reality is, but I always felt the congregation voted on the budget with their dollars. And so that the fiduciary responsibility really, to me, belongs with the finance committee and the board, but we all have different ways of doing it and different traditions, but sometimes it's good to ask some questions of why did we do it this way, and is there a better way to do it? The big thing for policy here I want to note is there a process to amend the budget or appeal the budget as presented? And as the year goes on, if we need to make changes, where does that authority rest? For example, if we're short on funds, who makes the decision about what bills get paid? I know of churches where the treasurer just tells the pastor, you're gonna have to hold your check for a week until we get some more money in. But they paid the light bill and they paid the curriculum and they paid the copy machine contract and all those kinds of things. And that may have been the right thing to do, but nobody talked about it. And one person was left with the responsibility and frankly, the burden. And in churches where this is tight week to week, it is a significant responsibility to have to manufacture money to pay the bills. So there should be some process for that doesn't force it to fall on one person who's usually a volunteer. That's just not a very fair thing for us to do. So when we have those over expenditures, is there a ceiling or a gap before we have to have a meeting about it? You can exceed your budget by 10%, and if we go past that, then we got a problem. What if we miss that target? What happens? What's the process for the variance and dealing with that? And where does that decision rest? I suggest that paid employees should not vote on the personnel side of the budget. That would be a conflict of interest. But I often felt that as the pastor, I wanted to vote on the program side of the budget because I was a member of the board with voice and vote. And so we divided our budget into personnel, and I left the room for the vote, not all of the discussion. I stayed around to answer questions. But then for final discussion and vote, I'd leave the room when they voted on the personnel section. But I was in the room and very much a part of the discussion when we were talking about all the other elements of the budget, because the church had called me to execute the mission and vision, and they were giving me a tool with which I was primarily responsible for making sure that happened with a group of lay leadership. I needed the right tool. I didn't need a pair of pliers if what was really necessary was some duct tape. And I wanted to be sure that we had the right tools and the right allocations to do what we'd been asked to do. That doesn't mean I always got my way, but I felt it was important for my voice to be heard in those meetings. You may feel different, and that's fine, but I share my own experience there. Remember, budgets project income, and so we're going to do that. Our offerings, both the general operating we call undesignated that people put in the plate or send in weekly or get debited from their account now electronically. You may have an endowment that feeds your operating or missional expenses. You may have restrictions on how that's to be used. Good thing if you do. You may have user fees you collect for things you receive from people, whether it's buying books for a book study or it's other types of fees for folks who are engaging in program activities that help offset those costs. You may build in transfer from savings. Here's where I mentioned that your budget doesn't always have to be balanced. You may be wanting to begin a new initiative. You may have resources from which to do that. You may have projected that you're not going to have enough income from your donor base to get there, but this new initiative is essential to your moving forward with the vision God has given your church to accomplish. So you may choose to transfer some money from savings to cover that, and you can create a line item for that. It becomes an income. It's a set amount. And again, if things don't, line up, you're going to have a meeting to deal with those variances and differences. You may receive rent, you may have grants. The important thing about grants is that your record keeping for grants has to be very carefully done. And all donor designations, I mentioned this earlier, must be adhered to. So if somebody gives you $100 to buy green paint for the sanctuary, you have two options. You can take the $100 and buy green paint, or you can decide not to take the $100. But you can't take the $100 and buy blue paint unless they've agreed to that. I do want to touch on another piece of budgeting here that I think is important. That has to do with staff. So often we balance our budgets on the backs of our staff, and that's not good stewardship. It is not just, and it shoots us in the foot long term when our pastor or other members of our staff eventually have to leave us in order to get a raise to be able to afford to raise their family or make their household work financially. So I think that cost of living raises for staff are pretty crucial. And I believe, you'll see here, does the church provide a COLA and what index is used? Not Coke or Pepsi here. Of course, we're talking about a cost of living adjustment. You can use something as simple as a widely known COLA that's related to Social Security. This is what that's going up. You can use indexes that are better geared to your part of the country. You can Google that and find a long list. But the COLA preserves the buying power of your pastor, and this is important, the buying power of your church for a new pastor or staff person. Because if you've been underpaying your pastor for 6 or 8 years, and then you need to go out and find a new one, you're going to find out you can't afford one. So not only is it about treating our staff fairly, but it's about the church being prepared and honest about its future. At some point, we may need a new staff person to replace the one we have now, and we don't want to have to find $35,000 all at once to figure out how to get a new full-time pastor. There should also be the possibility of a merit raise, particularly if finances allow for it. But there should be some kind of a process, and you can develop policy around this and be conscious of how it affects the budget. The personnel side also should pay attention to the benefits stipulated by the contract under which you hired your pastor. Excuse me. So if the agreement was you were going to provide for health insurance, one can make an argument that morally and ethically you need to continue to do that, or you need to renegotiate with the pastor and not just have it show up in next year's budget that, oh, by the way, you're on your own for health insurance. So these personnel issues around budgeting are important, and we need to be kind of sensitive to those. I think most of you understand how a clergy package is put together. I'm not going to go into detail on this, but there are tax benefits for the pastor, for the church to take time to do this and to do it well. You may not be able to pay your pastor what he or she is worth, but you can at least save them some tax dollars by being aware of the certain privileges that are available for clergy in our nonprofit 501c3 settings as churches. The point is that all of this policy leads to good practice, and good practice builds trust. People and staff trust that the church will do this well and fairly and justly. It establishes uniform procedures so we treat everyone the same way. It's a part of our fiduciary responsibility to be sure that we don't neglect certain duties that we have that could cause us to lose our 501c3 status, or worse yet, have us start a prison ministry for someone on the inside. We don't want to do that. So we want to protect our leaders, and we want to protect the church's assets. So major areas of policy related to fiduciary responsibility and general operations deal with how we handle money, how we report, how we budget, how we do personnel, when and if and how we audit. We should have policies around legacy giving so we can faithfully receive people's accumulated resource gift they spend a lifetime accumulating. We don't want to blow it all in one night. At a board meeting, we want to be a place where people trust we will do with resources what needs to be done, and that we're good stewards long term of gifts that again they've taken a lifetime to accumulate. We want to have policies around gifts so that we can receipt gifts and acknowledge gifts, so we can retire gifts. And as I mentioned with the green paid, occasionally we might want to refuse gifts. It's much more an issue than with carpet and paint. With something like somebody wants to give you a gift of land that turns out to be an EPA Superfund site, that may not be a gift you want to receive. Not to mention, how many more couches do you need in the youth room with 3 legs or 85 keyed pianos? There's a point where you want to, say no, and it's okay. And you have a policy that backs you up on that. Not to mention, a true story, I was in a church once that had 3 lights on the piano, none of which worked. But they had no way to retire gifts that had been given, and each of those lights had a little brass plaque on it that said it had been given in memory of someone for this purpose, to be on the piano or the organ to provide light. And so they didn't know what to do with them. So there they were, all lined up on the piano, and the piano player was still playing blind in the dark. So these kinds of things are kind of, regardless of how small or how large we are, these things are important for doing things well. They build trust, and trust engenders generosity because people believe we'll do with what we say we're going to do. So when we talk about handling money, we want to know who's authorized by the Constitution or policy and practice, who those people are, how we choose them, how long they serve. Do we go to the effort of bonding them as a part of our insurance? You need to be aware that if you do that with your insurance, that you may be, if you discover malfeasance or theft or fraud, you may be required to prosecute those individuals when that happens for the insurance to pay. But some churches choose as a part of their insurance coverage to automatically bond the treasurer and the financial secretary of some nature like that, which is protection for them and specifically for the church and its assets. These are things for us to think about, and we need to be aware of what the implications of those choices are. Big things here to remember: offerings should never be unattended. The counting of money should always be done with 2 or more persons who are not related. So husband and wife or brother-in-law and sister-in-law, kind of people who are related should not be doing this together because we love them. We want to protect them from any kind of suspicion or, worse yet, temptation. The persons who handle money should not be those responsible for record keeping or reviews. So we count the money and record it. And that's different from the person who then reports back to the fiduciary group that they have these separate sheets, if you will, from the Sunday offering of, we received this much from these people, and it's recorded, it's checked twice, and 2 copies are made. And then we have that for future audit. A copy is given to the financial secretary for recording. They're not the same person, so nobody's tempted to get their thumb on the scale here, right? Not that we think any of the people would do that. We wouldn't have asked them to do the job if they would, but trust is not an internal control. And the money should get to the bank as soon as possible. Now, I can't cover all the details tonight. This is to tease you a little bit, whet your appetite for exploring all of these things further. But these are important ways in which we are good ambassadors for the realm of God, because we do things in a right and good and proper way, and we can be trusted. So when you're counting, the envelopes are open, cash is counted, recorded, checks total recorded, counted twice. Both counters sign the report, duplicate it, and they secure the money for future deposit. Understand that the people we ask to do this are being absolutely charged with confidentiality. This is not some information they share, and we want to understand, we want them to know that they're privileged with information, and it's not information for them to share with anyone else. It's part of the reporting process. They have a specific duty, and we trust that they're not the town gossip. We're going to immediately go post it on Facebook what so-and-so's check was on Sunday. Those are not the people we're going to ask to do this job. Those are not people who are going to help us with this particular aspect of doing church. Confidentiality is different from secrecy. I've been involved with congregations where the financial secretary was the only person who had any information about anyone's giving. And it was between them and God and the individual, right? You could have gotten the nuclear launch codes out of some of these financial secretaries before you would have ever gotten any information about people's giving. But if we think about money as a spiritual matter, and we think about it as related to where people are in their life, sometimes it might be important for the pastor to know if there's been a change in patterns or amount. And who would be responsible for that information, and how would the pastor be given that information? I don't have time to deep dive on this tonight, but I am going to tell you that I think it's important sometimes for the pastor to know if there's been a change. They don't have to know the amount, just if there's been a change in the pattern or the amount that tells them something's going on in an individual's life. It will show up in the offering plate more often than not before it shows up anyplace else. For the pastor, this is not an invitation to go jaunting off to the individual's house and saying, "Where's your money, deadbeat?" or "Thanks for the extra bucks. I trust you all better than that." The conversation is a pastoral conversation in which money probably will never be brought up, certainly not by the pastor. It's a check-in. It's an opportunity to engage the people just to see how things are and what's going on. And more often than not, in my experience, people then would talk about difficulties they were having or significant joys or celebrations they had that had caused them to do something a particular way related to their giving. And it allowed me to be a better pastor to them to know that information. Part of what we want to know is just in general, how often are we reporting on financial activity? What are we reporting and how often are we doing it? Certainly, however often the board meets with its fiduciary responsibility, it needs to see that information. How often the congregation needs to see that, that can be debated. How often should people be made aware of their record of giving? I believe we do that quarterly, because when we do that quarterly, we're being given an opportunity now 4 times a year to put a letter with those numbers that say, "Dear Fred and Mary, thank you so much." Notice what those first 2 words were. "Thank you so much for your support to our congregation. Because of your support," and now we can name something that's happened because the church is engaged, has resources to do its mission and ministry. We can name something the church is doing that they have made possible. And then on the back, you can refer them to the record of their giving that we have to date. This is, by the way, another internal control, because if they believe they've given X and the report shows they've given Y, they need to ask questions. And if they can't get good answers to their questions, then we need to together ask some additional questions of our recording and reporting process to be sure that it's accurate and to be sure we don't have a problem. So reporting is really important. It also matters to the IRS, by the way, although not as many people qualify now with a larger deduction available. Some people still, with their charitable giving, can qualify to itemize, and the charitable giving is a piece of that. So we want to be sure we record accurate information, and that once a year we share that accurate information with our donor in a timely way so they have it for their tax records. It may or may not. It's not our judgment whether it does or doesn't qualify. We simply provide a record. The IRS, by the way, wants you to provide this fairly short paragraph that says federal regulations require us to state we have not provided you with any goods or services in exchange for your contribution. This is important because there's been no tangible benefit, only incidental tangible benefits by their spiritual growth or their becoming a better person or whatever. Why this matters is that sometimes we might do a fundraising event where people have bought things at auction. They bought gift cards or, who knows what, a gift basket or something. Well, the value of that basket has to be deducted from the donation they've made. My favorite example is a golf outing. I participate in several of these a year. The biggest one that's important to me is a cancer society. And I pay $125 in my case for greens fees. It includes my lunch, my greens fees, and a donation. In this case, for easy math, I've made it $100. And the donation is really only $60 because the green fees and lunch were calculated by the golf course to be worth $40. And you need to say that so that you are not getting the church in any trouble by suggesting you are offering something that you're not offering, or that you're, if you're providing a benefit, that you say that. Some other simple things to think about, and I'm going to stop us here for a few questions. Is there a policy for receiving real properties and securities? If somebody wanted to make a donation of stock, do you know how to do that? Somebody wanted to gift you real estate, do you know what the process is for that and how you would do that? Your regional office can help you if you don't know how to do that. There are other resources out there, but it would be good to know you know how to do that, and for your people that know that you know how to do that, because they might never have considered that before. But now that you've said, hey, we know how to do this, and it might be an advantage to you to make the gift that way, they might consider it, and you might get a more significant gift than you might have otherwise. And I talked earlier then about the nature of gifts and the ability to refuse them. That's important stuff. You don't think about refusing gifts too often, but it can be important. Retiring a gift is important, like those lights on the piano. Part of our policy should remind us that we need to acknowledge the person who's given us a gift with a thank you note. If we're retiring a legacy item that's been given that no longer functions, that, Radio Shack TRS Tandy 80 computer that was given to us probably isn't helping us much anymore. Before it hits the dumpster, it might be nice to remind people that gift was given in memory and honor of so-and-so, and it was used by the church for X number of years. And we might think to send them or their family a thank you for the faithful service that item gave. Again, around these things, do we have a policy that governs the kind of investments that we make and how we save money and what we do with those, so the money is working for us? That's a stewardship opportunity. Who has the authority to do that? Can just any old person take a bunch of money and dump it into a 5-year CD at 0.5% and say, look at the good thing I've done? Not such a good thing. And do you have a policy around reserves? I know most of us are not worrying about how much reserve we have, but some of our churches have healthy reserves. And is there a cap on how much of that we should have before we decide, hey, we need to move some of this to mission and ministry? At what point triggers that? Is it a percentage of budget? Is it 90 days or 120 days of operating expenses? What are the things that matter to that, that might make a decision around that keep us honest and good stewards of the money and using it the way people intended for us to use it, which wasn't just to squirrel it away in the mattress of the church upstairs, but to use it to change the world for Jesus Christ. So these policies help us do things. I mentioned the conflict of interest policy. I'll touch on it quickly here. This essentially, I'll give you an example so much as a policy. We had a person who was cleaning the church with a snowplow every time it snowed. And they were kind and agreed to do it for free on Sunday mornings. They couldn't do it Saturday night if it snowed. They were doing other contract work they had, but they agreed before church Sunday morning they would do it. That person stopped doing that, left that business, retired, and suddenly we had to go find snowplow stuff. Well, old Bobby had he had a plow in the front of his pickup. He was willing to do it for $150 a week, every time he had to do it. That's great, but wouldn't it be nice if we went out and got some bids on that and see what the going rate was? No offense to Bobby. We'd love to have Bobby do it. We just want to be sure we're treating Bobby fairly and that the church is being treated fairly. And then since Bobby was a member of the board, Bobby couldn't vote on that decision. And as a member of the trustees, he had to sign a conflict of interest because the trustees were responsible for snow plowing that said that he was involved with this part of the church's life, and he benefited from it, but it was clear and transparent, and the church had a process for dealing with it. These forms are not complicated, and you can find them online. Again, we want to just be sure we got 2 sets of eyes on everything with bank statements, checking accounts, transfers, credit card statements, that we can look in and see what is happening with the movement of cash and money and resources in the church, that the right person can do that and has help in that process. And what I call the no one rule, which is you're not dependent on any one person for anything. And that doesn't matter whether it's how to work that funky programmable thermostat that's hooked up to a computer, or how to clear a jam in the copy machine, or how to make the audio work on Sunday morning, and everything in between. It has to do with a safe deposit box key, a combination to a safe, et cetera, et cetera. We don't want to be beholden to one person, and we don't want to be at risk of, if that person is unable to accomplish their duties, if they die, if they get mad and quit, that somehow now we can't take care of this problem. It is a part of our fiduciary and governance policy that's a best practice. Other policies you might have are listed here, including who can use the church credit card if you have one, and how they report on that, how they get repaid, receipts, et cetera, whether or not they have a time limit for when they do reimbursements, how they submit their travel expenses, all of those things, the way in which you verify mileage. It's good to have policies and forms for that, because it protects everybody from any suspicion that somebody might be doing something wrong. Last thing here before we're going to go to breakout groups, and we're going to do a couple case studies and come back and report. The audit. Audits are expensive. A full audit that includes a management letter, meaning a statement not only of the veracity of your reports, but also of the systems that you have, the internal controls you have to protect and guard assets and the reporting, et cetera. They're very expensive. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be done. But we do need to, if we don't pay for an accountant to do this, we should do a testing of the records. And there are ways we can do that internally that help us know that we are checking on these things, and we're protecting the people who handle the money from any suspicion of any wrongdoing. That's really important. The other thing is that every checkbook that's under the 501c3 should be subject to being looked at. That includes, God forbid, the CWF, the Boy Scouts, the youth group, any group that's functioning under your 501c3. Really, for our larger churches in particular, you need to be sure that you're looking at these things, because your 501c3 status is at risk. So a good time to audit, professional or otherwise, is when the financial secretary or treasurer is being replaced, so there's a clean set of books to start. If someone has raised a question of personal integrity, we got to look, and we may have to go look deep. If there's a question about process and systems, and we're calling it into question, we want to go back and look at what we're doing and test our records. And if you're going to apply for a loan, anticipate that the bank is going to want an audited report of your finances. So I have here questions, and we'll stop for those, and then we're going to go to breakout rooms and come back and report on our activity. Jamie, I'm going to come to you and say, how are we doing? Where are we? It looks like most people are still here, although I don't know if their cats are watching or they are, but it looks like we still have a pretty good count.
Okay, it looks like I've got you all separated into groups of 5 or 6. So you'll see a prompt come up on your screen to join your room. So I'm going to open your rooms now, and if you'll just hit join, that will take you in a separate breakout room. And then the hope is that I will be able to send you a prompt in that room that you'll be able to discuss. If not, I will place it in the chat, which you should still be able to see. But let's go ahead and start opening these rooms and just join those for me. Okay, it does look like they're going into their rooms.
Okay, and they have the first question.
I've put the question in the chat.
Okay. We have a way to tell them they have 10 minutes to come up with an answer to the question.
Yeah, let me,
And then are you running a timer for them?
I'll start that timer now at 8 minutes.
Okay. I've given something that looks like an instruction, maybe.
I'm gonna pop in one of these rooms and just double check and
See
make
how they're
sure.
doing. Yeah. How are we doing?
I'm having to go in each group individually and send them the prompt. I'm sure there's an easier way, but I don't know how. So they're getting it one by one, but it's going to be okay.
Okay.
Okay, so I've got the question out to everyone and they're working on it.
Okay,
I feel like there must be an easier way to do that, and I hate that I don't know what that easier way is.
that's okay. We'll go with it as it is. And when we call them back, we'll process it and then we'll send them out and we can give it to them again, however it is that you need to do it to make it work.
Okay. Sounds
So
good.
we had till 8:30, right?
Yeah, depending on how folks do. So my timer here says we have just about 20 or so seconds, but that last group just got it. So we may want to give them an
Sure.
extra,
No,
little
we
bit of
can give
extra.
some more time. I meant that our stop time tonight is 8:30, right?
Yeah, but we typically say it's an hour, but we're already past that hour. So I think, this is the end. And I really hadn't had any questions come up other than, can they have a copy of the presentation? And then I also have, some of the links that you sent me in the email that I'll put in the chat at the end of the session as well.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if in the settings it's going to be 2 minutes or 1 minute, 1 minute, I'm sorry, when I close the room, it'll prompt
Okay.
them, I think 60 seconds or whatever.
That's fine. So whenever you think you're ready, just bring them back. I hope this is what you had in mind for tonight.
I think it's been excellent. I think it's been really beneficial to all of them, and hopefully they'll give us some good feedback on it when we finish, when you finish the session here. So I've got those rooms closing out in about 40 seconds.
Okay.
And then I'll
And
be
then
prepared
I'll-
to go in
Yeah,
room
we'll-
by room this time instead
And
of
drop
trying to
in the
figure it out.
second one, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I won't waste so much of that time trying to figure it out. I'm sure there's a way.
We'll welcome them back as they return.
Okay, we're going now.
Okay, well, you had a few minutes. I'm gonna do better with our second one. We have another question that Bruce has for us to look at and discuss, so I'll get it to you all quicker.
Okay.
What it is.
Recording in progress.
Welcome back, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yes.
Gonna switch us
welcome
over to
back.
gallery view so we can see each other.
Okay.
Some of you had a little more time than others. We've kind of figured out our technical glitch. Just quickly, does anybody want to comment on what some of the problems were with that little case study we gave you? That is an actual scenario, though it did not involve people from Arizona. And that case study, by the way, was gifted to me by my good friend Todd Adams, president of our pension fund, many years ago, when he was teaching financial best practices in workshops in different regions. So some of you may have seen this before. If you've been a student of mine, I know you've seen this before. Anybody want to comment on what was wrong and how we could fix it?
Our group, we didn't have but very little time. We talked about the mileage thing. It was very, it was very simple to keep up with your mileage without estimating. And our churches pretty much required receipts for everything. So that's kind of what we talked about.
It's
Any others?
poor leadership on her part.
She wasn't setting a very good example, was she?
Right.
Exactly. And my thought, and the first part of it is, it's not a matter of trust. It's a matter of doing, it's a principle of the thing. And like I was sharing, documents be conversations. So you got documents to show everything that you've done. It shouldn't be a question about your documents if it's what you're saying that you're doing. Your documents will back that up.
That's right. Mileage logs now they're. Go ahead.
Our group mentioned that the 501c3 status was in jeopardy with her refusing to log down her mileage and to submit receipts.
That's correct. And she was tax liable. If she couldn't prove that, the IRS could, if she were to be audited and there was to be a question, she would lose the ability to deduct reimbursement for expenses and or reimbursement for mileage or both from her taxes, and the tax exempt status of the church could be in jeopardy. Now that's a bit of a long shot, I'll be the first to admit, but it could happen. And our job is to protect that, right? As fiduciaries for the church, our job is to protect that. There are lots of good apps now for both taking care of your receipts and your mileage that I wish I'd had when I was in pastoral ministry. Trust me, as a part of the Office of General Minister and President, they do my bookkeeping and I don't get paid until I turn in things. I use those things now. There are ways to take pictures of my receipts. There are ways to put it the app, turn on the app when I'm driving someplace and record my mileage and generate a report. And that's really important that I do that. And I have to do it in a timely manner. If I don't turn it in 30 days, they don't have to pay me. So that's another way to inspire staff or volunteers to comply, is to put a 30-day or a 60-day or 45-day time limit on it. Because we don't have it 45 days from the date of the transaction, we're not going to return we're not obligated to reimburse you. If you don't have receipts, we're not going to reimburse you, right?
Amen.
Okay, that was the first one. Now we're going to send you back again and hopefully very quickly give you one. This one's a little bit longer. It's got a few more complicated pieces, again from Todd, and again based on things that I myself have seen with my own eyes. So you're going to take a look at this, evaluate what was wrong and what we could do to fix it. And then we'll take general questions after we report back, and we'll be done for the night. I thank you for your attentiveness, and hopefully this is helpful to you. So let's head back to breakout rooms, and we'll go from there.
Okay, good. Everybody's got it.
Everybody's got the question, and everybody's in the room, and we're good to go.
Everybody's got it. Miss Harper here is not in a room.
I'm just getting up here, sorry.
Yeah, so let me see if I can put you in a room.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, I guess we should be calling them back now, giving them a warning. That happens automatically, I'm assuming.
They've got about 25 seconds. Should start coming back in.
Great, thank you.
Progress.
Welcome back.
Progress.
Looks like we've got a couple of rooms still in there chatting, so they should be, it's gonna automatically kick them out in,
I was gonna say,
in about
doesn't it
30
automatically-
seconds.
I thought there was a automatic boot switch. And
Yeah,
we're
welcome
back. Welcome. There was a lot going on in that little scenario, wasn't there? Who would like to, who wants to
Yes.
say something about anything? Go ahead, Horace, your light's green.
Well, nothing was done right. That was never more than one person handling the money. Somebody may be living in Mexico.
Well, we hope not. But
Yeah.
we wouldn't know if they took any money, would we?
We
Right.
would not.
So we had the line of control was broken without dual controls at every
Yeah.
step of the way.
It was.
So that was an issue. Recording was probably an issue if we have somebody going in and just checking a deposit slip. Money sitting unlocked. I have seen this many times before, either on the communion table or in an office when I've been visiting churches. There sit the offering plates in between worship or after worship when everybody's out doing everything else. And I've gone in the office to take off my robe when I'm visiting, and there sits the money and nobody's with the money. 3 days unattended in the church. All of those things are problems, aren't they?
And they are.
And what are the ways we can fix that? What are the things we need to do to be sure that's not your church in my exam at LTS the next time I teach this class?
Don't go on around.
I think most of us, we have rules that but we've just gotten relaxed and the trust issue jumps up because we're in the church, in the church house. So we need to be more committed to doing, we spoke about it being spiritual. And we need to be more committed to being spiritual with all phases of church work.
And collect and count the money after each service. So have your financial officers available once the funds are collected, the offering. Then they need to go ahead, collect, count, and put it in the deposit box, the bag, and take it to the bank each service.
Yeah, certainly if you don't have a way to secure it at the church, if you don't have a safe or a locked place for it to be, that there's a limited number of keys for, it's one thing to lock it in a closet, but if everybody's got a copy of the church key that opens every room, including the closet, then that
Right.
helps too much.
Not even the secretary's desk.
Right. Yep. So there are a number of things in there that policy can help with. And the reason I bring this one up is because we are often short volunteers now. Our churches are smaller. Post-COVID, we have even fewer people to often help us. That this still needs to remain a priority for us, and we need to explain to people why we need their help to do this, what trust we're placing in them, it's an honor to handle these gifts, these sacred gifts that have been entrusted to us, to be accountable to a partner in doing it and accountable to the church for doing it in a way that secures the church's resources for the purpose of doing mission and ministry, because that's what we're about. All of these policies are meant to do that. Most of them, you may look at your church and say, oh, we don't need that. We don't need that. Until something happens and you're going to say, crap, I wish we had that. Pardon my French. Right? I wish we had that. So I put two things in the link, two links for you in the chat. Jamie's done it for me. One is a link to the Treasurer's Handbook, which is a resource that's created by our financial ministries that gets some regular updates, and it's fairly up to date now. It's available in English and in Spanish, and it covers some of these things we have talked about tonight, a good many of them. It also talks about remitting to Disciple Mission Fund and other things that are kind of important in our covenantal relationship. We hope you support DMF with your congregation because it makes ministries like this one that at two levels possible. One, your region, and two, a resource to the region like the Center for Faith and Giving. We are supported by DMF dollars, and we thank you for that, and we are grateful for that. Nancy says they should be, there's two blue things. The other is a study document. And this was commissioned by the General Assembly of the Christian Church in Columbus, Ohio, for the Center for Faith and Giving to come up with a biblical and theological statement and study for the whole church on stewardship matters. And that's available in 5 languages. The link there is for the one in English. If you need it in Korean, if you need it in Creole, if you need it in French, if you need it in Spanish, let me know and I'll direct you to that. Although I think that link shows all of the links when you follow it to the alternate languages. It's a 22-page document with 108 Bible citations in it. So when we're talking about this being a spiritual issue, that's how we have approached it. And I want to close with that tonight, that for me, the teaching of all of this stuff we do related to stewardship and financial best practices and ways in which we help the church garner resources to do what we're called to do is first and foremost a spiritual exercise. And our understanding of stewardship starts as a matter of spiritual discipline, and it's biblically based. And we are called to be stewards. It is the existential calling of us in Genesis 1. If you read between the lines, when we are called to rule in the earth, to have dominion in the earth, the way that God does in the cosmos, we are called to manage these resources, to help these resources flow for the benefit of all creation. And so I want to encourage you to think about doing Bible study with your folks. Those of you who are struggling in garnering resources you need, where there may be more capacity than you're being able to tap, that reminding people and teaching them biblical theological principles around this and what it means as a part of our life, the whole of our life, we're stewards of all the things that come into our life, is really critical in our faith formation. And I think I can say with confidence that one of the marks of a mature Christian and one of the marks of a mature congregation is that they are good stewards of the resources that have been entrusted to them.
Mhm.
So it's a call on us as individuals to grow in this. You know, First Peter says we are, 4:10 says, we're stewards of the many colored graces of God. So it's all of this, right? The manifold witness of everything that God has provided. And so that's really essential. And as congregations, we want to steward well what people give us as a witness to what we believe matters, to make a bigger, better, more meaningful impact in the world. And so people will trust us with even more significant gifts so that we can do even more to advance the realm of God. I had on my calendar, this was a 90-minute event, and I apologize. I discovered that it was only supposed to be a 60-minute event. So God bless you for staying this long. Are there any general questions before we send you on your way? Any comments that would be helpful either to me or for the good of the order? And yes, you will get the slides because the region has those and has those available.
Good.
Is this useful tonight?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Good. Well, I thank you, and I'll allow the region to close us out however they want to do that. Thank you for allowing me the privilege of being with you tonight. God bless you all.
God bless you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Pastor Bruce, for being here with us and helping us navigate financial situations in our congregations. I noticed that some of you are putting your email. So I will say that I do send the recording and any information to Lisa Tedder, but as you all know, it's a very busy time in the region. So if you would like me to send you these resources directly to your email, if you'll put it in the chat, if you'll just put your emails in the chat, I will send these resources directly to you. And if you are clergy and you're in this presentation, Bishop Melvin wants to remind you that tomorrow we have a clergy gathering at 7 p.m. via Zoom. And it'll be a time for us to celebrate our ministries, a vision for this year. And we'll close that with Bishop Melvin having communion with us. So please remember to log into that tomorrow. And if you continue to put those emails, I'll get that out to you. Have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Jimmy, if you decide you want to do the narrative budget one, let me know. And I'll try to be more in keeping with time.
Well, that's okay. I think that was a really good session and they hung in. I mean, we had 35
They did.
participants and they hung in through the whole session. So that means you were doing something right.
I'm grateful for their indulging the moment. And I do hope that it helps congregations. Just a reminder of these things that we kind of know, but we don't always practice. So,
Exactly.
but my privilege again, thank you for the invitation, and I'll, if whatever you want to do next, just let me know and I'll be happy to do
I will
that.
certainly be reaching out to you again. Thank you, Bruce.
Peace, my friend.
You too.